What's up, party people? Keys Dan here, your man in the air chair, coming to you live in a living color from the Radio What Studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. Go ahead, I'll wait. DJLittleRock.com. Check availability, get a free price quote, and maybe you could have me at your next event. The people need to be entertained, and I like to provide such entertainment. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. For today, let's learn together on the program, What Makes You Smarter. Now, on with the show. Today on the program, 10 things you need to know today for Saturday, March 21st, 2020. 10 things you need to know today. Number 1, states ramp up coronavirus restrictions. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Democrat, on Friday issued a stay-at-home order to 13 million state residents in an effort to slow the spread of the COVID-19 coronavirus. The mandate calls on residents to remain indoors except for essential outings like buying groceries or seeking medical care. It's effective from Saturday evening until April 7th. Illinois has 422 confirmed cases of COVID-19 and 4 have died. California issued a similar order on Thursday, and New York is also ramping up its restrictions, banning nearly all gatherings of any size and requiring workers in non-essential businesses to stay home starting Sunday. Connecticut and Oregon are reportedly planning to implement similar measures. This is according to NBC News and the Associated Press. Number 2, Senate reportedly getting closer to agreement on coronavirus stimulus bill. The Senate is holding a weekend session beginning at noon Saturday, so the chamber can expedite an agreement on a stimulus package to provide relief from the coronavirus pandemic. The final bill could reportedly cost at least $1 trillion. Negotiators said they're getting closer to an agreement, but they missed the original Friday night deadline set by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican Kentucky, because of differences over increased unemployment insurance payments, financial assistance for hospitals and healthcare providers, and funds to cover for state governments' revenue shortfalls. But Congress remains under pressure to get something done quickly, and Republicans, who hold the majority, reportedly believe Democrats won't block any rescue bill with time running short. This is according to The Hill and Politico. Number 3, Trump pauses student loan collection, closes U.S.-Mexico border. President Trump enacted a series of strong measures on Friday meant to combat the spread of the new coronavirus and curb the economic downfall it has brought. In a Friday press conference, Trump announced that the U.S. Department of Education would waive interest on student loans and that borrowers could suspend loan payments for at least 60 days, quote, without penalty, end quote. Trump also announced that the U.S. and Mexico border had mutually agreed to close their shared border to all non-essential travel. A similar agreement to close the U.S.-Canada border goes into effect Friday night. The president said he would invoke the Defense Production Act to produce much-needed medical supplies. The Korean War-era Act will let Trump order manufacturers to start producing ventilators and other necessary goods. This is according to ABC News. Number 4, market drop closes out worst week since 2008. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed down 913 points on Friday afternoon. The S&P 500 sank 4.3%, and the NASDAQ Composite slid 3.8%, completing a remarkably volatile week that ultimately ended as all 3 indexes worst since the 2008 financial crisis. Markets have fluctuated rapidly as news of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic changes outlooks daily. As New York, California, and Illinois drastically moved to shut down non-essential businesses to contain the outbreak, Indexes sank, though some experts say investors are seemingly, quote, trading more on emotion than actual data, end quote. Quote, the Dow is down more than 24% for March and is currently on pace for its biggest one-month fall since September 1931, end quote, writes CNBC. This is according to CNBC. Number 5, Bloomberg gives $18 million to DNC rather than pay staffers as pledged. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg is backing out of his promise to form an independent super PAC to support the eventual Democratic nominee against President Trump, instead of laying off his staff and transferring $18 million from his campaign to the DNC. Bloomberg had promised his campaign staff that they would have jobs through the November election. Quote, the dynamics of the race have also fundamentally changed, end quote, said Bloomberg. Quote, and it is critically important that we all do everything we can to support our eventual nominee and scale the Democratic Party's general election efforts, end quote. FEC regulations show Bloomberg transferred nearly $1 billion of his own money to his campaign during his 3-month run. This is according to the New York Times and NBC News. Number 6, at least 4 senators sold significant stock holdings shortly before markets tanked. Senators Richard Burr, Republican North Carolina, Kelly Loeffler, Republican Georgia, Dianne Feinstein, Democrat California, and James Inhofe, Republican Oklahoma, sold large stock holdings in late January through mid-February after receiving closed-door briefings on the COVID-19 coronavirus. But before it spread, sent the stock market spiraling downward. Loeffler began selling between $1.3 million and $3.1 million in stock on the same day she attended a January 24th Senate Health Committee briefing on COVID-19. Feinstein sold $1.5 million to $6 million worth of shares between January 31st and February 18th. Inhofe unloaded as much as $400,000 worth of stock on January 27th, then up to $100,000 more on February 20th. The stock market started its sharp descent on February 21st. Feinstein, like Loeffler, said she had no role in selling the stock. Burr denied wrongdoing and called for a Senate Ethics Committee investigation into his stock sales. This is according to the New York Times and NBC News. Number 7. Tax return filing date pushed to July 15th. The filing deadline for U.S. tax returns has been moved from April 15th to July 15th. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin announced Friday. Mnuchin said he made the decision at President Trump's direction with the intention of giving people more time to pay tax penalties. Those who may have refunds are encouraged to file and claim that money now. Mnuchin added, the pause comes as more and more Americans find themselves out of work as COVID-19 continues to spread and force business shutdowns, some of which will inevitably become permanent. This is according to Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. Number 8, North Korea fires 2 short-range ballistic missiles. North Korea launched 2 projectiles, believed to be short-range ballistic missiles, into the Sea of Japan early Saturday. South Korea's military said, and Japan's Coast Guard confirmed, as the United States and China continue to wait for Pyongyang to return to denuclearization talks. It was North Korea's 3rd weapons test in the past 3 weeks. Seoul described the actions as, quote, extremely inappropriate, end quote, given that South Korea and much of the world are dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. North Korea has not reported any COVID-19 cases, but many observers are skeptical considering its proximity to China and South Korea, both of which have dealt with major outbreaks, as well as Pyongyang's history of censorship. This is according to the BBC and the Wall Street Journal. Number 9, PG&E Newsom strike bankruptcy deal. Pacific Gas and Electric reached a deal Friday with Governor Gavin Newsom, Democrat, allowing the company to emerge from bankruptcy, which it fell into because its outdated system triggered a series of California's devastating wildfires in 2017 and 2018 by June 30th. In the agreement, the utility pledged billions of dollars to aid wildfire victims and improve safety to prevent future disasters. A federal judge will still need to sign off on the plan, but Newsom's agreement reportedly makes the final step much more likely. Newsom said the negotiations resulted in, quote, a totally transformed board and leadership structure for the company, end quote, with, quote, real accountability tools to ensure safety and reliability, end quote. This is according to the Associated Press and the New York Times. Number 10, Kenny Rogers dies at 81. Country music star Kenny Rogers died Friday night from natural causes, his family said in a statement early Saturday. He was 81. Rogers' career spanned 6 decades and included 24 number one hits and more than 50 million albums sold in the United States alone. He was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2013. 2 years later, he announced his farewell tour, with his last performances taking place in 2017 before his health began to take a toll. Quote, Kenny Rogers left an indelible mark on the history of American music, end quote. His publicist Keith Hagan said in a statement, quote, his songs have endeared music lovers and touched the lives of millions around the world, end quote. This is according to CNN and Fox News. That's 10 things you need to know today for Saturday, March 21st, 2020. This has been What Makes You Smarter. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Once again, this is What Makes You Smarter. I'm Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here. If you like what you hear, I encourage you to follow What Makes You Smarter on social media. Find it on Facebook at What Makes You Smarter, Instagram at What Makes You Smarter, Twitter at SmarterWhat, and YouTube, username Keys Dan. Leave What Makes You Smarter podcast a review and subscribe. Listen to What Makes You Smarter podcast on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. My personal favorite, learn with me on my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Call 501-470-6386 and leave a message to set up a time for What Makes You Famous. Support What Makes You Smarter podcast using the PayPal, paypal.me/Keys Dan. Email info@radiowhat.com. What Makes You Smarter is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for